Mike's on.
Okay.
19.
Starting at 19?
10. 5.
Dr. Ernest always gives the
love
cues. I would now like to call to order the February 7th, 2024 meeting of the Indiana State Board of Education. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bess.
Here.
Ms. DeLosa.
Here.
Mr. Durham.
Present.
Dr. Ernest.
Present.
Mr. Gastineau.
Here.
Mr. Mapes.
Here.
Ms. Moat.
Here.
Ms. Rentschler.
She's here. I see her. Can you
She's
hear
on
us?
mute.
She's waving.
Yeah, we got her. We got her, yeah.
Mr. Watts.
Here.
Dr. Jenner.
Here.
Ms. Hamill's not attending.
Okay.
Okay.
So at this time, we're going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. It's a little bit different today because we're in a different room. I don't know that, do we have a flag? Miss Rentschler, do you have a flag?
Oh, there it is.
Listen,
Save the day.
I mean a teacher saving the day, always. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, that could not have been better planned. A teacher saving the day for the State Board of Ed. Thank you very, very much. Is there a motion to approve today's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
The motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the January 10th, 2024 meeting?
So moved. Second.
With a motion and a second, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So a few things to kick us off today. First of all, it's always wonderful when we look out and we have many people, but mainly when we have many future teachers in our audience. Today we are welcoming Butler University pre-service students. They are led by a couple of professors that are always on it in terms of getting students here to the meeting, Angela Major and Catherine Pagan. So Butler students, could you please stand? So just to forewarn each of you, usually at the end of the meeting, you may have some board members who try to recruit you.
We've already done that.
You've already done that, so just be prepared and stick around. We'd love to get a picture with you and the board after the meeting today. So again, we're so glad you're here. Also, this is halftime of the Indiana legislative session. This is very much an education session, a lot of bills moving, several bills that really matter for the Indiana State Board of Education because we're seeking flexibility so that we can begin rulemaking for Indiana's future high school diplomas. Rulemaking will start March 27th. That is going to be probably one of the biggest things that the board does and one of the biggest things for the future of our state and our students. And again, that conversation will kick off March 27th. The other thing that I want to emphasize, we are now by state law required to do 2 public comment periods. And we see that as a huge advantage to us as a board because we want to hear public feedback and public comment. So when we introduce the rule March 27th, it will immediately kick off an opportunity for the public to weigh in. And again, we're eager for that. In April 10th, so just a couple of weeks after that, the board will launch another rulemaking situation when we rulemaking for literacy. We have a couple of major literacy bills. One is Senate Bill 1, which is obviously the Senate priority. It's governor's agenda item to focus on reading. So that will be rulemaking in April, and then we'll rulemaking in May for summer school because the General Assembly is also going to give us flexibility as a board to prioritize some summer school. So State Board of Ed, if you think it's been exciting so far, here we go. But we certainly look forward to that. I also want to encourage students across the state or schools to encourage their students across the state to apply for the 2024 Governor's STEM team. Each year we select 4 students from across Indiana, one representing science, one representing technology, one representing engineering, and one representing mathematics. It's really important to just acknowledge the incredible work that happens in our schools, and specifically these 4 students are always remarkable. So please apply. Today we have a couple of presentations. Our first one will be regarding the Indiana GPS dashboard. We've shared that is a constantly improving dashboard. So we have some updates and some enhancements that have been launched. We also are welcoming Jason Dougal, the president and COO of the National Center on Education and the Economy, and Nathan Dreskel, chief of policy, to really talk about excuse me. I thought my words were good to go. I had a meeting already this morning. Let me try it again. Indiana's education system in a changing world. So really look forward to that discussion. At this time, I'll welcome any board members if they have any comments or reports. Mr. Watts.
Just one, and I apologize. He's not going to say it, so I'm going to have to bring it up, but you have to give me the specifics. Our colleague, Byron, was nominated for a Global Leadership Award.
Wow.
I apologize that I can't speak to it, but if you would.
You've been
Speak
hiding
for me,
that. I would have
if you
totally
I know
called
he
you
wouldn't have
out.
brought it up, but it's pretty awesome, so
Yeah.
I would like to at least hear about it.
A group I work with there was a organization in Dubai who actually leads this leadership development piece, and each year they award people from around the world, and so they had an education category that they had added in that leadership, and so a company that I work for in Europe nominated me for that, and so I got to go to Dubai, so it was quite the
Wow.
it was quite the experience. Thanks, BJ. You're right. I would have never said a word. So thank you.
I'm so glad that you did. What else do you know about board
I learned
members?
this morning. I was like, man.
I mean, that's really outstanding.
I know who not to tell things.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
Thank you.
But I tell you, I mean, that speaks to. I tell you, it really, really matters who's on your board and the expertise level, the passion level. Really proud
Bubbles,
of you.
man. I have passion bubbles.
I know you do. Listen, I've seen them. We've all seen them. We love it. Any other board member comments or reports? Seeing none, we'll shift to public comment. Kendra Johnson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
to
If you
each and
could-
every one of you.
Kendra, if you could pull your mic down so that, there you go.
I'll start again. Good morning to each and every one of you.
Good morning.
Good morning to our esteemed guests. As you know, this month is February, and it is Black History Month. As you can tell by what I have on, this is one of my ways of celebrating. And 2 workshops that I do are Who Are You and Who Am I? Black History Month is a great month to reflect on the contributions and the history of people of color and of African American descent. Another workshop I do is called What's in a Name. Looking up your name also gives you a sense of self. What does it mean? How do you live up to your name? My name is Kendra S. Johnson, Kendra Shantae Johnson. Kendra is Old English for wisdom. Shantae is African for light of wisdom. And Johnson, English, child of the beloved. So when I look at my name, one of the things I say to myself is that when I speak, wisdom should come out of my mouth. There is a tradition among some African people, and the tradition is that a younger person would look to an older person and say, "Elder, may I speak?" And the elder would give their permission to speak. That is a way of showing respect for the ones that came before. A great person once said, you should have a mentor and you should have a protege. A mentor to learn from their wisdom and help establish you in your path, and a protege to continue your work and or help guide them in terms of setting their own paths. Also, around my neck is a necklace given to me by one of my children. It lists all of my children's names. I hope in time to have some earrings that have my name on them. I wear the ring that belonged to my mother and a bracelet that was given to me by my father, both who are no longer with me. What do? I teach their history and the history before them to my children so that my children can teach them, their children, their history and who they are. So, lastly, my hat. I wear a covering. It's a sign of my faith. I often tell people, learn other individuals' faith, because by learning their faith, you learn their morals, their belief, and you get some insight into who they are. And it helps you look into yourself to see what do you believe and where do you want to go. So with all of that being said, I thank you for your time, and I also encourage you to look into your own history, to look into the history of my people, and to learn what makes all of us who we are and how we can work together for a better world, better community. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kendra. You really lived up to your name, wisdom. We appreciate your sharing some wisdom with us today. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
With a motion and a second, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, at this time, we will go ahead and shift to our presentation portion. We're going to start with Indiana GPS. So Jason Callahan, Assistant Secretary of Student Pathways and Opportunities, as well as Dr. John Keller, our Chief Information Officer, are going to walk us through some of the updates to Indiana GPS.
Good morning, Dr. Jenner, State Board. I think Dr. Keller's going to hang back so he can walk through some of the features as I talk through that. So,
Dr. Keller. No, I'm kidding. Some of my team likes to hang back, and I like to give him a hard time for liking to hang back. But tell you, he gets a lot of stuff done, so we're going to let him hang back. All right.
That's right. I just want to begin by, again, thanking the board for the opportunity to present on where the team is. As we've said all along, this is an iterative process. We can go ahead and, I guess, do I have that power? Awesome. This is an iterative process, and so this kicked off with House Enrolled Act 1514 in 2021, where we were charged with coming up with a comprehensive dashboard, longitudinal indicators, that would begin with kindergarten readiness all the way to 10 years after graduation, sustained employment, median wage income, and some of those indicators, really a PK to 20 or PK to career dashboard. And so, as we said, we built this around the 5 characteristics of Indiana graduates prepared to succeed: academic mastery, career and post-secondary readiness, communication and collaboration, work ethic, civic, financial, and digital literacy. Joey, I think we can go ahead and click on this and I'll talk through. As we came up with, obviously, if we're gonna cover that span of time, it's gonna take a lot of indicators. So we originally landed and brought to the board a couple of years ago 17 indicators. And in order to tell this complex story, we knew that the dashboard was going to require multiple layers. And so the first layer is the scrolly telling feature that when you click on the Indiana Graduates Prepared to Succeed dashboard, it will walk you through. And we took this from Apple, very, very innovative technology. But this tells us really the why, and then the what, and where we're at. And so as you go through this, you will see things about 6th grade math scores and 3rd grade literacy scores and graduation pathway, where we're at with dual credit, and what it means to our graduates to have these outcomes. You see right there is our grad pathway, again, academic mastery, employability skills, and post-secondary competencies. And then again, what do these outcomes mean to our students? It's one of our favorite features, shows the students coming through a door. Through our data, looking at this, we realized that 64% of our students earned dual credit, and 2/3 of those students had 13.5 credit hours. So we knew they're a class or 2 away from a short-term certification. So from that scrolly telling, it lands on this state page, says where we're at, where we're going. I think this is important to highlight. We're rolling through it. I don't know if we could pause on that, but we have targets, and we have targets on 3rd grade literacy. So by 2027, 95% of our 3rd graders will be at grade level. 2030, 60% of our students will graduate high school with a credential of value. 2030, 95% of our students will complete graduation pathway. And so we're continuing to work on like setting aside those benchmark indicators from the 17, like what's our priority, what's most important for the state of Indiana. And again, I think we hear on repeat, science of reading, literacy, early literacy, academic fundamentals, credentials of value, eventually work-based learning. So I really always give Dr. Jenner credit that she allowed the team and really charged the team with coming out with this publicly over a year before we had to do that. So again, this was our charge was to produce this by fall.
And I would pause. I tell you what, it was the State Board of Ed. It was a lot of people who, it was the General Assembly, Representative Baining's here from the House. I mean, a number of people pushed this forward. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, but allowing us to do that allowed us to move so much quicker, because as soon as we published this publicly is when we started getting calls. And again, the process has been iterative. We've engaged stakeholders throughout it. Another person I would like to give credit to is Ron Sandlin, Brenda Earps, because they really built this process where we were going to engage stakeholders throughout each step. And as we do these new iterations on the dashboard, we want to be able to engage all stakeholders. But once we released this publicly, people began to email and call, and we had a lot of responses. Some of the iterations early on that we made, again, one of the charges was, how do you build a dashboard this complex, and within 10 seconds you can tell how well is that school serving its community? And so we build in some directional arrows. If from year to year the indicator was showing progress, it would be green. If it was decreasing, it would be red. And again, we heard from school leaders that were like, I understand the concept, but our graduation pathway completion is still at the benchmark. So we went back to the team, Dr. Keller, our consultants and resultant, and we iterated and built in where it actually shows that percentile change from year to year. And then we muted the colors a little bit on those directional arrows. We also put in a gold label that says if the school met the benchmark or not.
I think that's all coming.
Yeah.
I think that we have slides even to show that too, if you want to. I don't know if you have control or Dr. Keller in the back has control.
Again, this is state landing page. The benchmark goals. We're also working on a kindergarten readiness and PK to grade 2 literacy progress. These dials are an example, and again, you'll see that goal attained. So we have the scrolly telling, then we have the state landing page, we have the district. So there's an Indiana school district front page. We elevate those benchmark indicators out of the 17. And then in the spring of 2023, we had this more granular longitudinal data feature. And so you can click and read more about the individual indicators. In addition to that, and I don't think this is on the slide deck, schools can log in and see their student row level data. So the student data to the individual schools. So that's another feature that we updated. So one of the newest features of Indiana GPS is this badge where if the school is achieving the benchmark, they can go and download this badge and put it on their website. In addition to that, we wanted to make sure that the information we were putting out about third grade literacy was in line with other reports. So the default now is tested location, but there is still that feature to do majority enrolled. So there's a little filter that the user can use and show the difference in that indicator. And then finally, based on feedback from the field, they wanted some ability to compare contrast schools. And so we built in this favorite feature. So if you type in a school by zip code or a city or an address, you're going to come up, and again, in this shot, it will come up with the schools in that location.
So a lot of what we heard was we'd love to have something like Zillow. If you use Zillow, it's a real estate app where you can look. I tend to look at homes in Montana for whatever reason. We'll probably never live there, but I dream about that, just saying. They wanted that for schools, to be able to look at the ins and outs of what various schools offer, and where is literacy, and what about, do they have an early learning opportunity at the school? Like a number of different questions. And while we don't have the full scope of questions answered yet, what Jason's going to talk through, those 17 indicators that the board identified a year ago, we do have. So yesterday, and Jason, I know you'll talk through favorites, I had a school from Gary, Indiana reach out. I didn't know a lot about, I wanted to know what was their data and what were the schools around them. So I just went to this feature, typed in Gary, Indiana, and immediately every school in Gary, Indiana, all school types, traditional public, charter, non-public, all popped up right there immediately, all on the side. And then I wanted to clicked on literacy because I was looking specifically at where some of the schools were. But you can do a number of different searches based on what your needs might be, what your questions might be. So whether you're an educator, whether you're a community leader, whether you are a parent or family looking for a school, this is really meant to help. So walk through that next feature, Jason.
Yeah, and I think that's an important, those filters are this, again, you heard us from the beginning say this is learner-centered, future-focused, it's longitudinal, it's comprehensive, but it's that transparent nimbleness of using these multiple filters to be able to look at data in different ways. And so, again, on this, you can see that once you select your favorites, you can differentiate by the specific indicator. It will show you left to right. So once I favorite schools or that list of schools, it will bring them up left to right based on the indicator. So if it's, let's say, grad pathway completion, and I have 5 high schools up there, the one on the left will be the highest performing school to the right.
It's a good question. Why don't you ask that?
Yeah.
Is it school specific, or can you do
It-
district? Can you
it-
compare district to
It
district?
is school specific.
School specific, okay.
Yeah, and so it is a good point too, because let's say I put in
Evansville.
Evansville.
Thank you.
It's going to list every high school, primary, intermediate, middle school. And so if, let's say I'm a parent, I'm just looking at this and maybe I'm not aware that 3rd grade literacy is only in certain buildings. When it compares, it'll say NA in those. And then if I'm looking specifically for that in one school, it'll show on the right-hand side, like, this is not an indicator for this school. Like, this is not assessed in this school. So I think Dr. Keller's going, we're gonna give you a live demonstration. Again, our friends at Batesville, we often use. So again, you go to that Find the Schools. Previously, it was only that left tab, that Find a School or Corporation. Now there's a right one. So it's by location. In this instance, it's Batesville. Brings up all the schools listed in Batesville. And so on that right-hand side, just click on those stars. And as you click on those stars, you'll notice up in the toolbar, like up at the top, it'll say favorites. Now it shows 3 schools. Also, like right underneath that top bar, you have Batesville grades, school type. So we can look at, maybe my children are just in high school, and so I'm only interested in 9 through 12, so I can click those. Or a kindergarten, I can click those, and that'll just identify those schools in the city that are connected to that grade level.
Can I ask a quick question? So in a community like Batesville, are we able to, if they want a wider range, so Oldenburg Academy, for example, didn't pop up.
Yeah.
If we want a wider range, is a person able to extend that range?
So as long as you can do it there, but as long as you also don't clear out your favorites.
There it is. Okay.
Yeah.
So then you just you zoom, just like Zillow.
Yep.
You zoom out, but then you can and then you can capture more schools around.
Yep.
Which I think is really important. Gosh, not only if you're in rural Indiana, but also urban, suburban. So
And-
put in Evansville, Dr. Keller. Let's check out Evansville for a minute.
Like it. God's country.
And
Lots
as-
of schools in Evansville.
And as I was saying too, like those will stay. You notice now we're in Evansville. Up at the top, we still have those same 5 favorites.
Yeah.
Those will stay there indefinitely until you clean that out.
So can we clean? Tell you what, my words. Can we clean up the 5 favorites and then click on some of the Evansville schools? Well, I guess there we go. Or how many favorites are you able to do? Does it max out at 5?
No, it does not max out at 5. We can keep
okay.
going.
Okay, it's good to know.
And again, back to, I think it shows 3 on the site. So there's a scroll that you can go from left to right. So I don't think there's a number. You could keep adding as many. So under performance, as John's doing that, under performance is different indicators. So you can drag down and look at the specific indicators that you may be interested in at this level. You can, again, you think about transparency and nimbleness. Maybe I'm only interested in looking at diploma strength at 90%. And so I can filter that as well. Enrollment, school size, maybe I'm interested in a small school size or a large school size, and so we can differentiate schools by enrollment as well. And then finally, the free and reduced lunch indicator. And again, we can further get more granular dependent upon that indicator. So John, if you want to go to, maybe we just highlight some of these so I could show one more time. Yeah, so on the right-hand side too, you'll see for this specific school, the indicators and the percent. And then if you go up to favorites, right? Now we look left to right. Green, again, it's just a subtle color, just to the user's eye. That if we're looking at in student attendance, that's where you see the indicator, the highest indicator or the highest performing school. Grad pathway completion, again, left to right, 100% on the left, and then still hitting the benchmark at above 90% for Evansville.
Mr. Cook will love that example that you just used. I'll be sure to let it.
Dr. Jenner's putting me on the spot. We like to practice what schools we're looking at here. And
Evansville was a test. We're moving away from a Batesville example, challenging us today.
So if there's no other questions, again, this is like out of the newest features, the biggest one. And again, responding to people how that they want to be able to compare schools. Otherwise, when we first launched this, like basically you would have to look at that indicator and then write out. Yeah. I know I did that. I looked up college and career credentials and was like rank ordering in my former stomping ground. So this is a really nice feature to be able to compare and start like identifying where success is happening. And if I'm a school leader too, it's a great tool because I can say like, hey, this school is like us, is knocking it out of the park in third grade literacy. Maybe I need to contact and reach out and learn what's going on there.
Can I ask
Go
a
ahead.
question on the last one? When you had strength of diploma up there, was it strength of diploma true? Like, does it break it out into academic honors and all of those categories, or is it just that I graduated?
Not on that compare feature, but if you go into the specific school, it will break it down.
Okay.
And it'll break it down as well by student populations
Yes.
and longitudinal data. You can see all of that, the
Yep.
advanced feature.
So again, this is an iterative process, and we continue. And again, one of the things publicly I want to continue to ask schools to reach out if they want to see things on this dashboard. One of the things is we were just going through that stakeholder feedback is like, city is nice, but I think as Dr. Jenner pointed out, like let's say I'm moving into the greater Marion County region, maybe I want to compare, other surrounding counties. And so we are looking to build out this search by county, not just city feature, and search by route. One of the original conversations was like your IP address as well is like whenever I pull up, it's going to pull all those schools that are close to me, and then again to further be able to use the data, export it, so I can use it however I want to use it. And we heard that early on too. Is like we like the filter features, but we also want to be able to use this in the way that we individually in our district uses it or is able to talk to their own school boards, et cetera. And so we're going to continue to iterate on that. The other thing not on this is the migration of InView. We are continuing to work on that, and the goal is to have that completed by this fall.
Do you know what is our timeline to have these next 3 enhancements available? Any idea? Dr. Keller, would you like to respond to that? Summer. Okay, summer is what we're shooting for. And I would say that's one of the things the board had robust discussion about is we need this to be nimble and continue to improve. So I would challenge anyone out there, keep the ideas coming to us. We have a to-do list that we are moving through to continue to enhance this, but this is made by Indiana for Indiana, and it's exciting to see. So thank you.
Thank you.
I should have asked any tough questions for Jason or Dr. Keller before you got out of here. All right.
Hey, just real quick.
Yeah.
I do a lot of work nationally, and this comes up a lot. The fact that we've got not just the dashboard, but there's longitudinal data in there. We didn't get into that, but showing what happens to our graduates after they leave school. I mean, other states are looking at that going, like, how did you guys do that?
They are.
Right? And I think that I don't know if this is an award winning, I think it is.
It has, this is won awards.
Right.
Again, congrats to the team
So
and others who
it's
built it.
picking up a lot of attention nationally. And again,
Not awards like Byron,
Not-
Dr.
not that-
Ernest
not
won,
that prestigious.
but some awards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've had the opportunity to speak on a national, and we have won awards nationally for this. I would, again, give Dr. Keller a lot of credit for the statewide longitudinal data system grants, so the states are able to apply to that, and Indiana is one of the leaders in getting those, and those have been happening since like a decade. So the infrastructure is key to this success, but thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to call that out. It's a really big deal.
Thank you.
And by the way,
Oh, pull your mic in.
I was in a meeting with Jason and Katie yesterday, and they were bragged on the GPS by Harvard. So I want to throw that in there
Thank you.
as well, because they had really studied that as a piece of what they were doing.
Yeah, one of the unique features that we've learned that other states don't have is, so this pulls in the past or in some states, like if you're a superintendent or community leader or parent, family, you might have to go to multiple different state websites to figure out how all the data connects. Just to be clear, this pulls in data from the Department of Education, the Commission for Higher Education, the Department of Workforce Development, because we didn't even get into this. This gets into employment and enrollment longitudinal data, so we can see what's happening to a graduating class 10 years out. FSSA, I mean, a number of different state agencies, all of the data goes to one spot so that it makes it really easy for the consumer of the data to just find what they're looking for. So again, major group effort, a lot of different folks, and really appreciate the highlight. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Keller, for not making it up to the mic today, but operating everything. Yes, look at him, he's thrilled. He's like pumped. All right, let's now shift to our next presentation. And it's actually kind of timely that we started with that one. You could see some of Indiana's data and how to get direct access. We'd now like to welcome up Jason Dougal, President and COO of the National Center on Education and the Economy, and Nathan Dreskel, Chief of Policy, to really talk through Indiana's education system in a changing global context.
Thank you.
And you have a presentation?
Yeah.
Yep.
The slides gonna
Oh,
pop-
there we
There
go.
they are. Excellent. All right. So Nathan and I are going to tag team this. So I'll be at the podium, then he will, then we'll be back and forth. But before we get into the presentation in earnest, I want to at least introduce you to our organization for those who don't know it, the National Center on Education and the Economy. We're a nonprofit based in DC. As our name would suggest, we study at the intersection of education and the economy. For over 35 years, what we've been doing is studying around the world the highest performing education and workforce development systems to really glean lessons learned to use here in the United States. And our approach could really be summed up in 3 Ds: discover, design, and deliver. The discovery part of that is just as I described, going around the world looking, quite frankly, where very few others are looking and finding things that very few others are finding, and then taking that unique knowledge and bringing it back to the United States. And the design phase of this is designing policies at the state and district level that are responsive to the changing context of the global economy. And the deliver part is we actually house the largest and, by evaluation research, most effective leadership development program for public school leaders in the country. So what are we going to do with the 20 minutes that we have together? We're going to look ahead, we're going to look around, and we're going to look inward. The ahead is we're going to be looking on the horizon to see where the world is going, the world that students are facing, the world of work, civic life. We're going to look around. We're going to look around at what's happening around the country and around the world, what is cutting edge today. And we're going to look inward because, quite frankly, there are some wonderful things happening right here in Indiana. And then, of course, there's always opportunity for growth. And I think the example that was just shown of that dashboard, that is really one of the best I've seen anywhere in the country, and I've seen a lot of them. So that was a wonderful presentation to get to listen to. So let's talk about the world and how it's changed. Right, our education system, as the joke goes, if Rip Van Winkle woke up from a 100-year slumber, the only thing he would recognize is our education system, because it, quite frankly, hasn't changed much since it was designed, and it was designed at the turn of the century. Unfortunately, that was the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, not the 20th to the 21st. So let's look at what's happened in just the last 24 years or so in the way in which the world has changed for our students. And we put a few icons up here. And when I do this presentation with larger groups, I ask people to yell out what the icons show. But this is Google and Bluetooth and Wikipedia and MySpace and Facebook. And what it says is that our students who are sitting in universities today, they've never known a world in which you'd have to crack open an Encyclopedia Britannica, right? Any information they need, their whole life has been at their fingertips as long as they had access to a computer. For our students who are in high school, they don't know a world in which Gmail doesn't exist, or YouTube, or Twitter, or the iPhone. For them, information didn't just exist at their fingertips at a computer, but rather in their pocket, anywhere they went. For our middle school students, and these, for those who may not know all of the icons, it's an Android, Airbnb, broadband, wireless. That's an icon for an iPad, Instagram and Snapchat, right? For students in middle school, they don't know a world in which they're not directly connected to everybody they've ever met and anybody they haven't in their pocket, in addition to having any information they could possibly want, again, at the touch of their fingers in their pocket. For elementary school students, and here we go, we're getting into like some Jetsons type of world here, where with Alexa and Apple Watch and 5G broadband and TikTok, these are students who at the command of their voice can get anything they want, can get any information they want, order food to their house. I mean, it's incredible what you can do at just the spoken command at this point. And for our students who are just going to be entering our schools, our youngest students, that icon is ChatGPT, OpenAI. They will never know a world in which artificial intelligence doesn't exist. They will never know a workplace where artificial intelligence isn't more like a colleague than a tool. And so as I hand this off to Nathan, I'll ask you a rhetorical question, which is, are the schools in Indiana preparing our students for this world, for a world in which AI is a colleague to them as they leave? So Nathan.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Dr. Jenner. Thank you, members of the board, for having me. Jason introduced me as a DC-based Chief Policy Officer at NCE, but I want to say very, very quickly, I am first and foremost a son of Kentucky. I recognize admitting this in this room might spark some rivalries, but just
Where
want to
in
say...
Kentucky?
Yeah, Louisville.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
I live about 45 minutes from Louisville, in Indiana.
In
by the
Indiana,
way.
I know. Regardless of the rivalries, I travel all over the world, and it's very nice to be much closer to home than I normally get to be. So thank you all. So where Jason took us up to is in suggesting the challenge before us today. And that is crafting a system that's responsive to the needs of young people who are facing a world where technologies are fundamentally changing and disrupting the world of work. They're going to need to upskill many times throughout their careers, and they have to be prepared for jobs that are yet to be imagined. That may sound impossible, but we have some clues to guide us. The World Economic Forum Future of Jobs Survey 2023 describes the roles that have grown fastest, most consistently, and globally over the past 4 years, as well as those with the fastest declines. When you look at the left-hand column, the fastest declining jobs, most of those declining roles, clerks of various kinds, are due to automation. 34% of all business-related tasks currently are performed by machines. And that's actually good news in that it contradicts predictions from the 2020 Future of Jobs survey that suggested that 50% of those tasks would be automated. The pace of automation is actually slower than was suggested earlier. One hypothesis for that is that intelligent machines are, and algorithms are augmenting human performance rather than replacing them, which is a bit of silver lining in this data. And that silver lining may help explain why analytical thinking is now considered the top skill by more employers than any other. And why creative thinking is now the second top skill and has been consistently increasing in performance as workforce tasks become increasingly automated.
Can I go back to your last slide? I apologize.
Yeah, of course.
The declining jobs and growing jobs, that's a worldwide summation? Okay.
Yeah. So self-efficacy skills round out the top 5. That's resilience, flexibility, and agility, the ability to pivot, the ability to learn new tasks, upskill, reskill, lifelong learning, motivation and self-awareness, and curiosity. And this is all in recognition of workers' ability, the importance of workers' ability to adapt to disruption. So the question this begs for all of us at NCE is, what evidence do we have that our students are developing those skills? And as Jason alluded to, when we start to answer that question, the place we start is globally, although we always will translate those insights into the local and into the contextually driven. Why do we look globally? Well, it's from an economic perspective. It's also from a tactical perspective. We want to learn from our competitors. We want to learn where they've gotten, where they are, how they are addressing common challenges that we all face, and how they are thinking about the future, which is so unknown and scary. We want to be able to look anywhere to think how other people are thinking about these topics. But we want to do that in order to adapt what evidence suggests works and make it work for us, to translate insights into our own systems and use it to propel our own systems forward, not copy things that don't fit our context. So the first step in looking globally is figuring out who those competitors are. Yes, Dr. Chen?
Yeah, sorry, I have a question back on the skills slide.
Of course.
We've talked a lot as a board about the skills students will need and how really America is uniquely content obsessed. We're obsessed with this class and this class and this class. In other countries, it's a totally different conversation. They're obsessed with skills and skill development so that it's transferable. So as we're getting into redesigning the Indiana diplomas, we're really trying to balance and bridge the old content obsession with really a very making sure the students have the skills. Yeah. So were these current core top skills, are these international, number one, and number two, how did you build this list?
So this list comes directly, it's cut off on the bottom of the slide there, but from the World Economic Forum. They are global, but you see them closely mirrored in the United States as well. So it's a global survey of, I think, about 50 countries. I'd have to get the exact number for you. Want to underscore what you're saying, though. We in this country, I think, are uniquely obsessed with individual courses, ways of thinking about building course requirements. Critical thinking and creative thinking are not content agnostic. They can't be developed in a vacuum. They need some content. but the way that we've layered on content after content after content at the expense of thinking about skills and proficiency is pretty unique worldwide. So,
With the point that you started with, where our students are today, and that all of this content we're teaching them is right here.
Yep.
So how do we in our education system strike the balance and bridge to the future when we haven't changed in 100 years? If you have that silver bullet, we'd like to know that by the end of this presentation.
We are gonna suggest some pathways forward for you,
Okay.
including to continue down some paths that you're already starting on. It may be a longer conversation than we can complete in about 20 minutes, though.
Are there
Yes,
other
sir.
countries that have metrics that assess these skills? How do we?
Yeah,
I
so,
got nothing else. That's probably the most exciting thing to me is how do we quantify that a student has developed these skills?
yes, sir. So I'm going to get into a global assessment that I would argue is a much better measure of a number of these different skills in terms of country-specific assessments. Again, we could have a whole other session on the future of assessment and the metrics you use and what's actually meaningful both for fostering student growth and also for accountability purposes. Can't get into all of that today, but we do have a lot of evidence about that we can share with you after. We good, Dr. Jenner?
Yes.
All right, thank you. It's excellent segue, sir, thank you. The PISA assessment that you probably hear every 3 years or so is an assessment of how well 15-year-olds in 81 countries can apply what they know in certain domains to real-world problems. And I'll talk in a minute, I'll give some examples in a minute of what I mean by that. It measures application and transfer of knowledge, though, not a single consensus curriculum. And in addition to a score, it also looks at several measures, survey measures of student self-efficacy and life satisfaction and school culture as well. So we see it as an incredibly valuable measure of how well students globally are doing. And when you look at the PISA data, which again just came out in December, there are some reasons for optimism in that data I want to acknowledge up front. The United States declined. Most countries declined. The United States did not necessarily decline as steeply. Its relative improvements in reading and science has actually improved slightly. But there are also some real reasons to underscore a sense of urgency in this country and a sense of how far we still have to go. A large number of nations ranging from competitors in East Asia to neighbors very close to home are between 1.5 and 5.5 years ahead of students in the United States, 15-year-old students in the United States in mathematics. And when we look at that data and think about the implications, it has really troubling implications for us in terms of global competitiveness, readiness for post-secondary or career, and also some implications for critical thinking, which can be closely tied to mathematics aptitude, and just readiness for community engagement and for life. So just to give a little bit more context to this, US students have fairly strong basic skills, and they can recognize main ideas. 66% can do a problem where they basically are given Google Maps and asked to find the best route in a car. That does suggest a third of 15-year-olds in the United States can't do that very practical problem, which again is not, advanced theoretical calculus. It's just kind of navigating the world around you. And when you get into measures of how well students can apply those skills, distinguishing fact from opinion in passages, news articles, or applying scientific knowledge, only under a fifth, only 14%, 11%, 7% can do that. So urge you to think about the implications of that data. That's global data, though, and it may feel big and, pardon the expression, foreign to you. I recognize it's not Indiana data. Indiana is not reflected as a sub-jurisdiction in PISA. So in order to get a look closer to home, we have to pair PISA with other data sets. We can pair it with NAEP. We can compare it with state exams, and those aren't going to give us one-to-one comparisons, but they can enable us to make some inferences. So you probably all know NAEP is the exam that benchmarks states against one another, 4th and 8th grade, and then per state and 11th graders nationwide. Math and reading is primary subject, but a broader range as well. But it is a test of consensus curriculum, not application of knowledge. And Indiana's performance on NAEP is pretty decent, but shows some areas for improvement. You all are above average in math and average in reading, and you've seen declines, but those declines have been mirrored nationally post-pandemic, which I think is not an excuse to rest on laurels, but an acknowledgement that there are shared challenges and shared opportunities for growth everywhere. Likewise, persistent achievement gaps between students with different socioeconomic statuses and race and ethnicity, and proficiency that's probably, that shows some room for improvement across all grade levels and subjects. I'm gonna turn it back over to Jason really quickly.
Yeah, so this is the portion of the presentation we're going to go back and forth a few times. So, but in the interest of time, I'm really only going to focus on one thing on each of the next two slides, and I'm just going to preview both of them so you can see this is your English and reading scores and here are your math scores. And I think what's really important here are two things. One, what you can see is that statewide averages can hide a lot of disparate performance. I don't think anybody would be shocked by that. I'm sure you know districts in the state that are performing quite well and probably would answer my question about how are you preparing students for the future and say, well, I think we're doing a pretty good job. And in other districts who would say, well, we're really struggling with that. And you can see just by looking at a sample set of districts with regard to proficiency in math from 3rd grade to 6th grade that there is very, very different performance depending on what district you're focusing on. The ELA and reading and ELA scores, because they are different exams from 3rd grade to 6th grade administered here in Indiana. What's really interesting, again, you see that disparate performance. But what you also see, what really jumped out at me, is the decline in proficiency from 3rd to 6th grade. And there could be a lot of reasons for that. And we don't have the time to unpack all of that. But I do want to connect it to Mr. Watts, your question earlier around assessment. When you assess different things in the 3rd grade and 6th grade, the 3rd grade reading exam and the 6th grade ELA exam don't necessarily assess the same skills, you can have very disparate results that may not be indicative of what it appears, that all of a sudden something horrible is happening between 3rd and 6th grade. It might be that you're testing something very different. And so it begs the question, is it more, do we want to measure what's being measured in 3rd grade or what's being measured in 6th grade, which is measuring the skills and dispositions and content knowledge that are necessary to be successful in today's world. And I know that the state is already looking at revamping assessment, and there are some great examples, by the way. And again, we don't have the time, but we can come back. We could provide examples, or we can come back in another type of session to talk about assessment specifically. But what you can see here, what really teases out for me, is not necessarily that you have some sort of egregious issue that needs to be addressed in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, but that you need to look hard at the assessments that you're administering and what it is you're testing. If I could, I'm going to hand this back to Nathan. I think he's going to then hand it back to me relatively soon.
Sure.
When we look at the I guess PISA you can't because it's only a 15-year-old test, age 15. Mm-hmm. When we look at NAEP, at least looking at Indiana's data, we also see that drop in middle school. And maybe this is a bigger question. I think there needs to be a lot of R&D in assessment in our country. Yeah. I feel like as advanced as we are still assessing in many ways the same ways that we did 20 years ago. So I know you said you'd come back for another presentation,
Yeah.
but I just am leaning in a little bit on kind of your observations in our country and globally.
Just to be clear, I mean, a lot of the philosophy behind assessment in this country is driven by how we can administer at a low cost, right? So a lot of our exams are machine graded. They're machine graded, therefore the way in which they ask questions are multiple choice questions, right? And none of the skills that were on that list can really be assessed all that well through multiple choice machine graded exams. The world is changing dramatically, though. I mean, artificial intelligence can now assess writing, and so we're not hampered in the ways in which we were previously. But I think you're absolutely right. The way in which we think about assessment needs to dramatically change with the times.
I'm going to ask a question on the last slide, if you would, please.
The previous one?
Yeah, the previous.
Yeah.
The third grade and sixth grade, is that current third and sixth graders, or is that the same students when they were in third grade and in sixth grade?
So this is current, right? Yeah, this is current.
So
So
it'd be
third, this
two
is not
separate groups of
longitudinal.
students,
Yeah,
okay.
yep.
And before I get into this slide, also just want to underscore the need for R&D, and there are a number of us in a community nationally who are kind of beating that drum, and would encourage you, Dr. Jenner, in your role at CCSSO and as an advocate generally, to keep doing so, because it's crucially needed. So another way of thinking about outcomes is just in terms of thinking about how is school preparing students for college, career, and also community. There are a range of potential indicators for this, just as there are a range of potential paths. A lot of different things I could say in a lot of different slides, but I think what I really want to say here is that I have a team that helps me pull all kinds of data when I go all over the country, and often they are pulling, to your point, Dr. Jenner, from 7 different data sources, and in this case they went to 1, maybe 2. So you really have a strong asset to build on here in terms of Indiana GPS, both in terms of the data that it presents, the user-friendly way in which it presents it in order to create a sense of urgency and a case for change and an understanding of why education matters, and in terms of the ways that it braids government agencies together in order to enable people to look across secondary, post-secondary, and transition points between. That really does make you all, I can't claim it makes you 100% unique, but a national leader in this space, so please continue to build on that. The data does show, I think, a number of bright spots and also a number of places where you have some continuing work to do to get where you want to get according to your own goals. And I don't say that to disparage any schools in your system at all, but just to underscore the sense of urgency and the need to continue good work in this space. So that's all I want to say on that one. Pass it back. Sure.
So we're going to only be able to, at the time allotted, just sort of give you a glimpse at what it is other school systems are doing to meet the challenges in a more effective way, quite frankly, right? When we look at those PISA scores, what are the school systems doing that are consistently getting significantly better results than we are here in the U.S.? And you know, there are many ways to organize the way in which those systems are structured versus our own. But here's a way that I think is quick and easy to focus on in 3 areas. 1, proficiency-based learning system, right? Competency is the coin of the realm rather than seat time, right? So you don't have courses in which they're all 12-year-olds in the course, but they have 4 different levels of reading and they have 4 different levels of competency in the discipline that they're learning, which, you know, to move to a proficiency-based system requires almost everything to change, from the way in which you assess to the way in which you group students to the way in which they move and the speed at which they move, the courses that they have opportunities to take and the like. what we call world-class teaching and learning. Essentially, it's not just the way in which students learn that is different in these jurisdictions. The way in which teachers work. They work in a professional environment that, quite frankly, would look more consistent with the way in which lawyers work in a law firm, or doctors work in a hospital, or engineers work in an engineering firm, than the way in which our teachers work. It's and tied to the aligned, coherent, and coherent governance. They have a system of accountability that's much more what I would describe as a horizontal, like professional accountability to your colleagues, as opposed to a more vertical accountability model that's, quite frankly, more indicative of a blue-collar or factory model. And they have funding systems and responsibility and accountability in terms of what's measured that are all matched to those system goals. So it does look, quite frankly, very different. It's a very different sport they're playing than we are. And it is very hard, quite frankly, to adapt our current system to that current system.
When you talk about that form of evaluation, are you talking like a 360 review? Right, where
With regard to teachers or with regard to students?
yeah, you talked about how we currently evaluate, which is principal evaluates teacher,
Yeah.
superintendent evaluates principal,
Yeah.
board evaluates superintendent. It's very. Are you talking
very
about? You said a professional accountability to colleagues.
Yes.
So I'm trying to think about how do you actualize that?
Yeah.
And so what is that? What does that look like implementation wise?
Yeah, so what that looks like, first of all, teaching is much more of what I'll call a team sport in these countries, right? And so it's very rare to walk into a classroom and have only one adult in the classroom. Those teachers are likely engaged in some sort of lesson study or action learning that requires other teachers to come in, and they may be watching that teacher teach to understand how or evaluate how they teach, but more likely what they're evaluating is the performance of the lesson and how it is creating the type of learning environment for students that they want. And if it's not, they'll go back and revamp the lesson and try it again. So there's an accountability to colleagues in that if I'm teaching that revised lesson today, you're likely going to try it next week, and I'll be in your classroom, and we'll be observing that and trying to improve both your practice and mine. We may have a mentor teacher who is working with us, who will provide significant support, but also will help provide opportunities for growth. And that doesn't mean you're the principal. You're a colleague of ours. You're a teacher in that school just down the hallway from me. That's what I mean by more of a horizontal accountability. Not in the formal, I'm here to assess what you're doing and I have a rubric to see if you do the 15 things I hope to see in the 8 minutes in which I'm in your classroom today, right? But I'm sorry, you were.
No, I was just going to ask, are there any other states that are doing this at scale? Or is it mainly international right now?
Mostly internationally, but the state of Maryland has enacted just going into the pandemic, and so the implementation has been somewhat delayed, but an omnibus legislation package that was passed that was dubbed the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, which revamps all of what we're describing and creates by statute a career ladder where there are for teachers that allow for teachers to stay in the classroom, but take increasingly leadership roles that allow them to lead the learning of their colleagues without having to leave the classroom. So they might have a reduced teaching load where they teach maybe 60 or 70% of a standard load, with the other 30 or 40% of that time spent mentoring and coaching other teachers, co-planning, peer observation, going in and observing, but also having that mentee teacher come in and observing them, having debrief time, having opportunity to sit with those teachers and analyze data, formative assessment data, having that time, quite frankly, even to reach out to parents of students and teachers of those students in other subjects to see if maybe a particular student is just struggling in your class or struggling across the board, where that might be indicative of a much larger issue that needs maybe some parental involvement. Yeah, so all of that is in its nascent stage right now in Maryland, and we as an organization are heavily involved. We were heavily involved in the policy making, but now in the implementation, that design and deliver from earlier in the presentation. I'm actually going to skip this slide because I definitely want to make sure we have. I know we're running out of time.
I think let's walk through this slide
Okay,
because
okay,
I mean
great.
this is really setting us up for our March 27th meeting when we are going to
Wonderful.
probably lead the country in how we're looking at diplomas. Which, when you're on the bleeding edge, that can go a couple of ways. So we need to learn and hear from you. So please walk through that.
Yeah. All right. So, what are top performers doing? Thank you for the additional time, because I do think a lot of this is really important. We said we were going to look ahead in this presentation, and by looking ahead, that means we've been spending a lot of time talking to some of the world leaders in education and the folks who lead those systems. And they are not resting on their laurels. If anything, they are very self-critical of where they are and where they need to go to. And so they're focusing on things like how to harness these emerging technologies, these AI technologies, to create totally different learning environments. And that's not just for students, which of course we can imagine some of that, but artificial intelligence can be used now, especially in a combination of extractive and generative AI, to create whole courses and units in ways that would have taken months and years for teachers to be doing in addition to their day job, can now be done with technology, at least in a first draft of what a new course could look like, that can test critical thinking skills, that can create opportunities for collaboration and communication in multiple media, to do all of the things that are on that list earlier of the types of skills that are necessary in today's job world. They're learning how to use that technology to drive more personalized, interactive, and competency-based learning. I just spent some time just yesterday on the phone with, on the Zoom with somebody who was talking about the next generation of assessment will look nothing like it looks like today. It's going to be 20-minute conversations with artificial intelligent bots, because that's truly what assessment is. Assessment should, at its rawest form, involve a knowing other having a conversation with somebody to understand what they know and how they respond in a real dynamic conversation, as opposed to a static set of questions to answer. So, I mean, assessment, I think, is about to make an enormous leap forward.
What's the timeline on that? What's the estimation? Like, when is that coming?
So that was actually a startup company that I was talking to, a really forward-thinking leader who thinks that in the next 5 years that's going to be there, and it's going to change everything for assessment, more so than even where I think the world leaders are right now.
And to be clear, so Indiana has been a leader in integrating artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
We did you may even mention this, you might know about it. We launched a competitive grant for school districts to determine how might we leverage AI for the good. Yeah. And then BJ's question earlier about measuring skills.
Yes.
Like, we are really leaning in on how might we better measure students so we can support using that.
There are some fabulous existing assessments right now. I would point to the assessments designed by the Cambridge assessment system from Cambridge University that really do get to a lot of these skills. But I think where we're going in the next 5 years with artificial intelligence is going to dramatically change all of that, where a student will literally sit down and have an interactive conversation and be able to respond in ways that are dynamic and have their responses be responded to in a dynamic way, to have a conversation. If you really want to know what a student knows about science, it would be great if you could have a conversation with them to really get an accurate understanding of where they are. And I think that's where we're going. These systems are looking at how you support students more holistically. I mean, some people refer to it as social emotional learning, whatever it might be, but this notion that, executive function and your ability to understand how you learn and how to take responsibility for your learning, how to engage in metacognition. Those are the types of things that students need because we don't know what jobs are going to be there. What we need is students who are dynamic enough in their learning that they can learn whatever the new thing is that they need to learn, as opposed to we need to give them all the content they're ever going to need for the rest of their lives before they leave here.
Is that work being done, we talk about how to build skills and competencies for a changing workplace, is that being done solely by teachers, or is there a education industry partnership?
Yeah,
True successful, so the end user tells us these are the skills that our employees are going to need.
Yeah, I mean, I know Bob's here, but I mean, talk about Switzerland is a great example, right? And I use that
Where I
example
was at,
specifically because I know here in this state you've spent a lot of time studying that system, visiting that system, and understanding how some of what they're doing there can be adapted to the context here locally in Indiana. And yes, this is not just the job of teachers in some isolated way, but it's the job of teachers, schools, the community, the business community especially, because a lot of these, to apply these skills in a real world, you actually need the real world and employers. Oh, well, we must be out of time. There we go.
It's like flashing lights.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And just to finish up on this slide and put a fine point on it, how the teacher role needs to shift, right? The classic way is to say they're no longer the sage on the stage, but the facilitator, whatever. We talk about all these little, quirky ways in which people talk about it, but quite frankly, in a digital world where so much information is available to students at their fingertips, what is the role of a teacher? And where these world leaders are going is that teachers are truly facilitators of learning. They're helping build all of those skills, not the holder of knowledge and pouring some of that knowledge into each of the students in their classroom, which has incredible implications for the way in which you organize a classroom, the way in which you organize a school day, the way in which you organize a school year in terms of length of course, what's taught, how it's assessed. And they're moving away from a model of, I'll use the dates here because it's familiar, of like a course begins in August and it ends in May or June, and what you learn during that period of time is what you get, and you'll just move on to the next course in the sequence next year. It doesn't need to look anything like that, quite frankly, and there are incredible models out there. But I know we want to get to Indiana, and so we have, I think, 2 more slides, and Nathan, I'll take you to the end.
Well, the good news is, Dr. Jenner, Mr. Watts, you've actually anticipated a big part of this slide. So I'm here to say that if you were listening to what Jason was saying and hearing starting points that you already have in Indiana that are getting going, we see some of the same places too. Your work around building pilots to begin to explore the potential impacts of AI on teaching and learning is really, really promising, and we're excited to see it. We're really excited to see your work around expanding work-based learning and growing apprenticeships, work around the science of reading, the work around teacher recruitment and retention, and trying to make teaching a more financially sustainable career, and the work to build that holistic network of supports for students in partnership with various community partners who you have in the state. That's all in line with the global evidence that we have for you today. That being said, we think there are some places where you could double down or work with even more urgency. And it sounds like you're thinking some of the same thoughts too. Rethinking what's taught, how it's taught, and how it's assessed in light of the impact generative AI is going to have on teaching and learning is going to be it's going to be an all hands on deck exercise. It really is. We're going to need to build partnerships with educators, with students, with community voices, and with entrepreneurs and innovators to figure out how all of this is going to work and advocate nationally for the changes that we need to see as well. Your work around career-connected learning, or CTE, is incredibly promising. in order to build the resilient, adaptable students that we need, we would argue that students actually need a robust continuum of career-connected learning experiences all the way through. Obviously, that's going to look way different early on than it does later, but from career exploration to career experiences is where we see the global leaders going, and we'd encourage you to continue thinking about that as well. And then just want to underscore the point Jason was really drilling down on earlier, that teacher recruitment and retention is about money in part, but it's not just about money. It's about making teaching a career where teachers are excited to learn and grow for life and continue to adapt to the changing future as students are. And that's going to require some thought given to how schools are organized and how the teaching career looks and how teachers collaborate. So continuing to think about policy incentives that you all can provide to enable that kind of flexibility, mentorship, and support is really, really important. So with that, thank you for the indulgence on the time and the musical chairs. Either of us are happy to answer any questions or follow up.
Yeah, let's open it up for some conversation, questions, comments from the board. I knew if I waited. I saw him. Scott Vest, this is your jam.
It is. So just first of all, thank you guys for bringing this. This, I think, really underscores some of the issues we face, but it also, I think, really establishes the window of opportunity we have going forward. Like, this could be a generational change that we're looking at here. Like, this is, as Dr. Jenner laid out, the next few meetings that we have, we don't take that lightly. Like, that is, and again, especially to the students that are sitting out here that are going to be in this profession, like, understand what the sea change is going to look like. And I think we have an opportunity, and again, I know the diploma's up next month. Like, that is literally just the first step, because just changing the diploma is great, but again, to you guys' points, if we don't also then look at what is the role of the teacher, what is the role of AI, what is it, like, all of that comes together. The good news is, again, taking a hard look at standards, it feels like 5 years ago, but it was June, yeah. Like, all of those things have come together, and I think really, I guess the question I would have is, first of all, are there any other states who are thinking this broadly? And if so, like, who? Because it'd be really good to talk to them. And are we thinking in the right sequence of, again, we think like, if we radically redesign a diploma, that enables schools then to start to adjust how they think about teaching skills, not courses and credits. Like, what's the sequence that you guys said?
Yeah, so it's a really, really smart question. A few things that occur to me. Representative Baining was a member of a cohort that I helped support a number of years back that looked at this issue, and one of their top recommendations was you have to think systemically and holistically with a 10-year vision, but you also have to start somewhere, just for logistical reality and political reality as well. And I think, the answer to your question is going to be dependent on context, but the diploma and the requirements is a smart place to think about, because there are various incentives that can flow from that for students as well as for teachers as well as for the organization of schools. So that's as good a place as any if it sounds right for your state. But I would say if you're starting there, have a plan in place for how you're going to address the teaching career, the funding issues, the technology issues, the community supports, all of that, so that you're not losing sight of it as well. In terms of states, Jason referenced Maryland, I think is a good place to look. There is also strong work just getting off the ground in Nevada that's also looking at a 10-year plan for innovation, as well as Pennsylvania, that's framing this around the economic competitiveness and future prosperity of the state in terms of thinking through a 10-year plan. So those are places where I might get started, and we can facilitate some connections for you as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
And to be clear, one thing that this board, a 10-year plan feels too long, not acting with urgency. So this board in the state of Indiana, in a matter of just a few years, we've streamlined all of our standards. We're redoing our assessment. It's not going to be as competitive as we need it yet. Really leaning into AI, redoing our diplomas, our transcript, and redoing, it's going to look different than any other state in the country. Totally rethinking our transcript. Like you just heard BJ do a big sigh, because I could go on. Because it's like we're peeling back an onion that education has been the same in our country for over 100 years. And you illustrated in an excellent way why we don't have time to waste. We have to move. I think the most challenging, I think that I'm reflecting on, and other board members might have different challenging points. We commonly will talk about the challenges that are obvious, like if we want to scale work-based learning, will business and industry be ready to pull? We're creating a pull system. Will they be ready? And our General Assembly has really leaned in to consider how to be a part of that solution. What you brought up today that I don't know that we've spent enough time on is that educator pipeline piece. Because most teachers, we're teachers because we love kids and because most of us were pretty darn good at school. And at school, that has been the same for 100 years. So how do we bridge that? So, I mean, that's something, just to be honest with the board, that I'm contemplating. Gosh, I mean, we have a list of things that we are just getting after, but how do we support our educator profession to, quite frankly, have permission to be bold and take risks, try some things, and be forgiving about it when we learn how to, keep improving for kids. So I don't know if any other board members have reflections on that. Maybe Erica does. She has her hand up. So Erica.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the information you presented. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather, so I hope you guys can hear me pretty okay. I heard what you talked about regarding evaluations and how our model really needs to make changes. And thinking about the model that you presented sort of sounds like NIET's model, the TAP model that they use. Are you aware of any other evaluation systems or programs that really help to mimic that model that you're talking about regarding not just the principal evaluation, or evaluating, but more of a peer evaluator, like a teacher that is mentoring other teachers?
Well, you threw me a curveball right at the end there. Because I was thinking about student evaluation throughout your question, but are you referring to teacher evaluation?
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
referring to
Yeah.
teacher evaluations, but did I misunderstand? I know you mentioned maybe another teacher going into a teacher's classroom
Yep.
to help them improve instructionally.
Yeah.
So, and I'm aware of maybe a couple of evaluation models that mimic that, but I don't know if you have something to offer for administrators that are maybe looking for a different way to evaluate, and a more effective way to evaluate teachers.
Yeah. I think we need to change the frame, quite frankly, of the conversation, and it's less about evaluation and more about support. And I don't mean that just in a nicer language. I mean it genuinely as a different lens through which you view professional development, capacity building in a workforce. In this case, teachers, right? When I, by training, actually am a lawyer. I was a mergers and acquisitions attorney at one of the most prestigious law firms in the world and worked in Manhattan and represented companies that were on the cover of the Wall Street Journal on a daily basis. the work that I did in my law firm was never isolated. And while we did have some continuing legal education hours we needed to put in, all of my learning happened in real time working with my colleagues who were senior to me, and very quickly colleagues who were junior to me, because the expectation was that I had a responsibility to build my own capacity through these other people and to pay it forward, if you will, by building their capacity for the good of the organization, at that time, the good of the firm. That was not in an evaluative capacity. It was evaluative in that I would read something that a junior attorney wrote and I would give them a tremendous amount of feedback, but it wasn't evaluative in any sort of punitive way. I was evaluating their work for feedback for improvement. And that's the type of structure I'm describing when I was talking about peer-to-peer or horizontal accountability. It isn't the accountability that we see in a model that gives you a score, but rather an accountability that when I come to work every day, I feel an accountability not just to the students who I teach, but to the colleagues with whom I work every day. And that's because I work in an environment in which I don't close my door every day. An environment in which you're in my classroom normally, and I'm in yours normally. It's not atypical. It's not once a quarter or once a month or every third Tuesday we send the kids home early and have a professional learning day. It's that my practice is what I would describe as public, which is to say anybody in the building can see it at any time, and I can see anybody else's, which requires a totally different way to organize a master schedule, which I know is anathema to a principal who has been using a master schedule they've been comfortable with for their entire career to say, no, you're going to do school differently. But that's why it takes years to implement these changes, because it's not just enable the change. You need to give them incentives and support to change. Change is not easy, no kidding, right? But change is impossible if somebody just says, well, I've given you permission, change. You need a lot more than that. I need to show you what it looks like, show you support, give you support. It might require a different staffing model or what have you. Sorry, Mr. Watts.
I love that development model, but at the end of that, there was an evaluation.
Yes.
If you didn't make your firm money, I'm assuming, no matter how much
Right.
colleagues you worked with, you were
Yes.
probably short-lived. So there has to be something on our end, which is educational gains,
Absolutely.
saying, okay, love this development model, but we still have to look and see, are your kids learning?
Yep. And, the interesting thing is, if we take the leading jurisdiction in PISA, by far the leading jurisdiction, Singapore is dominating across all three subjects tested and by significant margins. If you look at their quote-unquote teacher accountability model, it has 0% based on student performance. Yeah, 0%. And you say, well, then how do they know that they're doing well? They rely on the professional judgment of colleagues, because if you have great teachers who can assess other teachers, you don't have to look at the student performance, because there's a lot that goes into what drives the performance of a student that happens outside of a classroom. But overall, by not focusing, if you will, on individual teachers and their growth of students, they have caused all boats to rise. Just as in a hospital, so we don't keep using law as the analogy, you don't want the youngest, least experienced doctor or surgeon to perform surgery on the most risky case. But what if the incentive was that if you lost that patient, you would be dinged from an accountability perspective? Well, the most senior person, the person who is most adept at doing it, would say, I'm not doing that surgery because it's likely it's not going to be successful. But if you want to push the profession forward, you need your best people taking on your toughest challenges. But they can't be punished for that by saying, well, you lost that patient. But of course, they can't lose every patient, right? So it's not to say student performance doesn't matter. Of course it does. In fact, it's what matters most. The question is, how do you best improve student performance at scale? And it may not be what makes the most logical sense, which is to hold every single teacher personally accountable for the performance of their student in the year in which they teach them, but rather hold the unit of the school or the district accountable for all students improving. And in these jurisdictions, typically what you see when a school's performance isn't where they would hope it would be is that they might bring multiple people from a high-performing school in to work with those teachers. They might swap half the staff of a very high-performing school with a low-performing school for a couple of years to help those teachers who were in that low-performing school work in an environment that's high-performing that like they had never experienced before. And for those teachers moving from the high-performing school to the lower-performing school to instill that type of culture. They might change leaders. But what they don't do is hold individuals accountable and say, you didn't do what you needed to do, because again, it's not an individual sport, it's a team sport. Everybody in the school is responsible for everybody's learning.
But you can't do that with the factory mentality that we've set up in our school systems. I mean, that's what has to change, right?
You got it,
I mean,
right?
that's part of the problem.
And that's why it's almost, if I can use this analogy, it's like moving from a gas automobile to an electric car. It looks a lot the same, right? They're driving down the road and you say, oh, they're probably very similar under the hood. In fact, an electric car is a computer on wheels. It's not a combustion engine, right? And the problem with change is how much of this old system can I retain that I feel comfortable with, that I know? And the answer is almost none of it, right? There's almost no part of that automobile that exists in a Tesla today, right? It looks the same, but everything about it is different. That, I think, is the best analogy I've come up with how different these systems are. And you hit the nail on the head, Pat, by saying, you can't do it with this factory mentality.
Dr. Ernest.
So I live by metaphor and analogy, so I really like that, right? But one of the things, and Katie, I brought this up to you and David the other day that I want us to remember, because you said, hey, any other thoughts? And you made me think about this, and Pat's as well. As we do this, since it can't be done overnight, we need to keep our eye, and this is not being critical, because I think we've done a good job at this, but I think we need to do better at it. It is the alignment piece, not related to accountability as much as everything else. And so, to your analogy, I was working with a school this past week where and my AI is trying to work for me. But I was in a school this week where they're being told, hey, you still need to buy gasoline for your electric car. Mm-hmm. Right? Where that's where the alignment wasn't right. Because, and in this case, and I'm going to use the example because I think it's one we need to watch. They've been given all of this flexibility to do what they need in their school, for their community, for their industry. But then when they do that and create a surveying, this was a specific to surveying, they can't get the funding because it doesn't fit some CTE model exactly the way that we've got it, right? Now,
Was this in Indiana?
Yes, this is in Indiana, and I've way oversimplified that, but yet I think it's a problem that we need to continue to keep at the top as we work through this. How do you take those little things out of the picture, right? Because what's important in very southern rural Indiana may not be the exact thing needed somewhere else, right? And we need to be nimble to adjust for that for our students. And those students, by the way, are learning transferable skills that if they went to another place, they could use, right? That just happens to be an area right there where there's a heavy need right now. And as it was described to me, every kid that wanted to come out with those certifications would be hired. Well, is that not something we're kind of about, right? In what we've just talked about. So sorry as I sling stuff across, but I just want us to keep that at the top of one of the things that we think about. How do we keep everything aligned to be able to work?
Yes. I think I mean, we're all going to have to hold each other accountable as we try to shift this, bridge this. There's no doubt going in, there are blind spots that we even as a board, we even as educators, as a state willing to move this direction, don't see yet. But I think part of, just like Indiana GPS was very iterative, very nimble, I think that's something that as a board, we're just going to have to be as we push to be better for our kids. Any other thoughts?
If I could just share just a couple of quick, why I think that worked so well is you, and I don't know if it's you personally, Dr. Jenner, but it sounds like it was, presented a vision for what that could be that people understood. Zillow. I can picture what that is. I can go online and say, oh, now I understand what it is you want out of this GPS system. That sort of vivid vision of what it looks like, as opposed to sort of a nebulous conceptual thing, and does this look like it? No, all right, I'll go back to the drawing board. Makes a huge difference. And this idea of full alignment, when I answered your question earlier about accountability, about assessment, I said 5 years. I actually want to be very clear about that. I think the technology is like 18 months to 2 years away. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to take 5 years to change the mindset, to get rid of the line item of how much gas are you spending on your electric car. Because if you're not spending any money on gas, I don't think you're actually making your car go. So you must be doing something wrong, right? That's the mindsets that need to change to make these things work. Sorry, Dr. Jenner.
BJ.
Just thanks.
You're
This was
into
really
this
good.
today.
No,
I love it.
I really enjoyed this, so thank you for coming in, both of you. This was really good.
Thank you. And we can all agree it only took 20 minutes, right?
Ish.
Ish.
So I think the next meeting that we have will be one of our biggest, because again, we'll present our diploma rule. We've not been hiding that ball. We've been very honest about the direction. We have to, by statute, as a board, we have to have that completed by December of 2024. We will. And it's going to look different. We've known as a board, and we're hearing from a variety of different stakeholder groups from around Indiana, that people are hungry for it to look different. I think what you've challenged us with today is not only to think about our teacher support, which has to be top of mind, but also, Scott, you've mentioned this on phone calls, others have too. We have to build a diploma that is going to be able to evolve with the changing environment that we're likely to see in education in the next 10 to 20 years. And there are several, our board is pretty, I'm going to say innovative for sure as a whole. We just have a continuum, like on an x-axis. Some are like ready to, I want to watch my words because media would love some of the words that I'm about to use, but some are ready to really launch, and others are more, we've got a bridge, but whatever we build, it's going to have to be flexible enough to move directionally towards kind of what you described today. So thank you for pushing us.
Thank you.
Thank you for pushing our thinking, and really appreciate the board for all your thoughtfulness and conversation too. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
With a motion and a second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. We'll do a picture with the Butler University students. So, board members, if you could head out to the main area, we'll get that taken.
That's why they don't last very
Man,
long.
that was.